Welcome to this month's Fit for Colorado Talk to the Doc Chat. I'm CBS4 anchor and health reporter Kathy Walsh. For the next half hour, we'll be chatting about fitness and health issues here on CBS4Denver.com. Throughout this chat, we encourage you to ask questions by simply typing them in the chat window at right, and we will do our best to answer those questions. In today's chat, we're going to discuss children and sports injuries. In the United States, about 3 million kids ages 14 and under get hurt playing sports each year. That's according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. More than 775,000 are treated in emergency rooms. Most of the injuries are the result of falls, being struck by an object, collisions, and overexertion. Some sports are more dangerous than others, but all have the potential for injury. Joining me today is Dr. Kris Gieger, orthopedic sports medicine specialist with the Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children at Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center, and Dr. Jim Hill, co-founder of America on the Move and director of the Center for Human Nutrition, UC Denver. All right, Dr. Gieger, I understand there are two types of sports injuries. Let's take a look. The first we call traumatic. There it goes, which is a more specific injury, like a break, that kind of a thing, a fall. Second one, overuse develops slowly over time, a subtle pain due to repetitive wear and tear. So what are the common traumatic injuries that we're seeing in kids these days?
Well, in the summertime, when the kids are out of school, we see a lot more injuries such as fractures. And the kids will fracture doing organized sports such as playing soccer, playing lacrosse, falling off a mountain bike, any of those kind of more organized things, or playing at the playground. It's light for longer, the kids are out of school, they have more free time, and so they're out at the playground. Lots of falling off the monkey bars, lots of falling off the slides, falling on the trampoline. Those are real big kind of fracture makers for the younger kids that aren't old enough to do organized sports.
So we talk about overuse injuries. What would those be? And I also understand those are on the rise. Explain.
Definitely. Since kids play sports year-round and play in much higher levels of competition that demand more and more training hours, they will have repetitive use injuries. And so, for example, the soccer players who are running all the time will have common overuse injuries such as shin splints, such as stress fractures, such as ankle tendonitis injuries. And those aren't because they have a particular fall or a particular collision. It's because they're doing the sports for hours and hours and hours on end.
Are we overdoing it, Dr. Hill?
Well, you know, I have to jump in here, Kathy. You know, I'm worried about the obesity aspect, and so I think Kris would probably agree. The answer isn't to have kids not be physically active. It's a different sort of thing, and I wonder, Kris, there are a lot of kids out there that are overweight and not in very good shape, and when they go out and do these things, are they prone to injuries, or are you seeing it in the most active kids?
Definitely. The kids who are not terribly active and who we would like to see increase their activity levels, they're definitely prone to overuse injuries because they're starting with a poor foundation. They're starting with poor strength, they're starting with poor flexibility, and they're not starting with a good foundation of the proper mechanics of how to be able to play safely and be able to play for longer periods of time without being injured.
So do kids usually learn a lot of that in PE, and we're not teaching them that?
Absolutely. The physical education in school is decreased so dramatically due to budget cuts. So not only are the kids having fewer hours per session, they're having fewer sessions per week. The number of people who are qualified to teach the kids and who are qualified to coach the kids during school are getting fewer and fewer also. And so the kids aren't getting a good foundation at school.
And what's happening yesterday, there was actually a statistic amazing. They said over a 10-year time period up till 2007, injuries in physical education in the gym up 150%. Part of it is, they said, larger classrooms and, like you said, not qualified people overseeing. So what are we doing to our kids?
Well, we're not giving them the right tools in order to develop the healthy baseline that they can then take throughout their sports career and use that as adults to be able to play safely and stay healthy.
See, I think that's really important because PE has a dual function. It's to get kids active, but it's also teaching them the skills that they can build on. And I think it's that latter that we aren't doing well because we don't have very much PE, and oftentimes it's not taught by teachers that are trained in that skill development. And so you get kids to run around a little bit and call it PE. It's serving one function but not the other.
Exactly. And it makes me worried to see if the kids who aren't exposed to any of the organized sports outside of school, if what they learn is having the gym class be their exposure to sports and it hurts them and they're not having fun, then they're getting a bad message.
That's exactly right. They're thinking, I don't want to do this again.
Exactly.
So
Why
they
should
go
I?
back to the computers and the video games and
the
everything
TV.
that are
Yeah,
much more
That
appealing.
doesn't hurt, that's
than-
fun.
Yeah.
Well, that is true at times. But anyway,
Right.
Let's talk about a couple of things so we can help people understand. Sprains and strains. Let's look over here and talk a little bit about the difference. I would put those up on the screen if we can. When we talk about a sprain, an injury to a ligament, you hear about it all the time. Oh, I sprained my knee, I sprained my ankle. A strain, on the other hand, is an injury to either a muscle or a tendon, the tissue that connects the muscles to the bones. It can be overstretched or torn, and again, there's that repetitive action, correct? So, common overuse injuries that we talked about. Again, can you give me some of those?
So, an ankle injury that would be a tendonitis kind of overuse
Hear a lot of
injury
that.
would be much more common than an overuse sprain kind of problem. And so the overuse tendonitis would be more of a strain. And you can have the pain either on the outside of the ankle or on the inside of the ankle. And those would be common in a lot of the running sports, in a lot of the athletes who do jumping, for example. Gymnasts and dancers can have problems with tendonitis in their ankles.
You hear a lot about like the meniscus, the ACL, all that kind of thing. What is that? That seems to me to be a big one nowadays with kids.
Definitely. And we used to underestimate the number of younger kids and teenagers who would have injuries to the meniscus and to the cartilage in their knees, thinking that those were more of an adult type problem. But considering the kids are playing much more high-level sports these days at younger ages, they can also be susceptible to the ligament tears like the ACL tear or a meniscus injury, a meniscal tear.
Yeah.
Chris, it just seems like to me when my kids were like in high school and so forth that kids are specializing in sports, where when I grew up, you know, you played baseball and football and everything else, whatever was in season, and now it just seems like you focus on one sport at the exclusion of the other, and I wonder if that doesn't contribute to overuse kinds of injuries.
Absolutely. Back in the day when people used to switch sports 2, 3 to 4 times a year, we had far fewer problems with overuse injuries because different body parts were having more of the workout. So you could have the jumping part during basketball season, you can have the throwing part during baseball season, you can have just plain running during track season, and so you kind of give each of the body parts a rest while you switch to the new sport.
I wonder if kids didn't also have more fun doing that.
Well, I
than
think so.
sticking
Now
with
they
one
push
sport.
it, and I have to tell you, for my children, you find that they'll say, well, if they're not going to play fall ball of a certain sport, then they're not getting into the spring ball. And I would say, she's 10 years old or she's 11 years old. How can you do that to a child? That's so unfair. And quite honestly, I think parents need to take a stand and say, my child likes to do a number of things. If you don't want them in that sport, I understand. I'll find a team that would like them, maybe on a recreational level. Because despite the fact that many parents think that their children will be pro athletes, I think we all know that that is few and far between.
Exactly.
Let's talk about a couple of the common causes of overuse injuries. Bring those up. Number one is overtraining, like we just talked about. You never give it a rest. You never give it a break. Returning from an injury too soon. How many times have I heard a coach say, when is she going to be ready? Have you gone to the doctor? When can she get back out here? Okay, using poor technique. They'll say, that quite honestly is one moneymaker, you have to get them in. They have to take the skills training as well as the regular coaching and everything else. But I guess in a lot of ways it does make sense if you get them with the right trainer. Repetitive exercise we talked about. Wearing the wrong shoes. You don't think about that. Or the wrong equipment. How serious can that be if you go out there, you're playing the game, you don't have the right things on?
Oh, definitely, it's very important. Shoes can be a major contributor to different kind of pains. Pain in the heel is a real common area of injury in younger kids, starting around 8 or 9 years old up until the teenagers. The growth plate in the heel is very susceptible to overuse injuries and causing a lot of pain in the heel. A lot of the kids who play the running sports that require cleats, for example, football, baseball, soccer, all those cleats have poor padding in the heels. And so having a little bit of heel support or a little arch support can kind of give that growth plate on the heel some protection so that they're less likely to have some of those kind of overuse pains and injuries.
I got a funny story for you. Soccer player, daughter, complained and complained and complained about her foot. This is my, as I call her, Calamity Jane, always getting hurt. I kept saying, suck it up, it's okay, let's go, move on, all right, it's not a big deal. All right, finally, I said, all right, we'll go to the doctor. Well, sure enough, she had cracked her 5th metatarsal. So did I feel bad? But you learn, unfortunately, sometimes we want to think that they're indestructible, that they're kids. Oh, shake it off, keep going. But we do have to listen to them and listen to their bodies and their aches and pains too, don't we?
You do, and some part of this is inevitable, right? If you have kids being active, you're going to have injuries. And so what we want to do is prevent the ones we can, but that we have to accept that kids are going to get hurt. And the good things about kids, other than you and I, is they heal very well, very quickly.
Exactly. I'm with you on that one. All right, we have a couple of questions. Billy's mom wants to know, what can I do to help my school become aware of these issues and the dramatic numbers you just mentioned? You know, we're talking about, I think, the number of injuries and also the fact that we don't have as much physical education as perhaps we should. I think I'll just answer that quickly is write a letter, write to your Board of Education. Get out there and talk to people and say, you know, this should be a priority.
You know, it is really interesting. If you look at PE in schools, you hardly find anybody that's against it, right? But they aren't actively for it. Imagine if schools said, well, you know, we're going to get rid of math. We don't think it's important, and the letters and everything. What would it take to elevate PE to that level to say, you know, we're very interested in our kids being smart, but we're also interested in them developing physically in the right way.
Yeah.
Right. It's not only that we want the kids to be rock star athletes and be professional moneymakers. We want them to develop healthy skills for their lifetime.
That's right.
We want them to be able to have all of the health benefits that will help them do well academically also.
That's exactly right, and they go hand in hand. We do
They
know
do.
that. Another question, Martha says, can you explain the nutrition angle as it relates to youth sports and injuries, for example, sodas, etc.? Do these things increase potential for injury?
Well, they probably do. I'll let Kris take a shot at this, but what we know is that if you're going to expend a lot of energy in physical activity, you need the fuel to do that. Food is fuel for physical activity. Sodas aren't a very good fuel to drive your muscles long term. And so I think you look at the really top pro athletes, nutrition is a big part of what they do because they need the right kind of fuel for their muscles.
And one of the things that we have